This is going to be an exercise selection on the front leaning rest. A couple of points on just technique for people doing it, but more so I wanted to discuss it for implementation strategies as to how to make it challenging beyond just the stability of the FLR. So how do we make the FLR and the front leaning rest a little bit more progressive in nature, where we can take some of our core stability that we build in just that hold and bring it up to another level of fitness. And some of the things that you know already that you want to think about is if you want to progress things in growth for exercise, you have to challenge that skill that you've just built. So, you know, what would challenge a skill of doing a bicep curl with three or four reps is adding load and trying 3 or 4 repetitions to make it real simple. You know, what adds challenge to doing double unders? Well, you may want to run and do double unders with it now in a circuit. So I need you to think like that. So how do you create a little bit more of a challenge to that? So for the FLR, we want to have a, you know, in two things that we look at for the FLR and the push-up, we basically want to have core control, meaning in the stability of the movement, and we want to have right to left balance in that shoulder blade when we're looking from above. So if you're ever a coach watching someone do it, it's just like you learned in CCP assessment that you want to make sure you have those two things in play when people do it. Hand position, elbow position, where people know they are in space with their shoulder blades, that's going to be an individual prescription. But what I want to discuss more so is how you can create implementation of things like the flywheel bike to create a challenge to that FLR, to make it a little bit more of a skill that you just want to level up on. Okay? So in form, if I was to just perform the FLR in a, let's just call it a rested position, I'm finishing from a rested position, and I go into the FLR in this hold, and then I was able to stop, maintain good position the whole time, recover, and repeat that same movement again, all I'm really challenging myself to is obviously the characteristics of the FLR with great protraction of shoulders, my core is nice and tight, quads and bum is contracted, and I could use a coach from the side to help me out on it too, but I just want to make sure that my shoulders are over my hands in that position, and I have adequate pressure through the floor and the feet. So you could ask your client, does it feel like you have a lot more work being placed towards your feet or more towards your hands? And then they can, you know, navigate what's most challenging. But based upon just those two holds, the only thing I'm challenging, besides blood pressure, is stored energy, right? So I have all this stored energy built up, and I get to do the movement and then challenge how well I can do that movement. So if I add a component to it, this will be a little loud and hopefully it won't take away from your understanding of it, but you can just imagine if I start to do, you know, some kind of aerobic activity. Let's pretend that I did that for 40 to 60 seconds, and I'll come back as to why that time frame is important. And now I go into the FLR, then it's not just stored energy that I'm trying to focus on in this movement. What I am getting out of that now by combining the two is that I have to have, if you think about it, in that position there, what prevents me from falling to the ground? It's basically shoulder collapse or me breaking at the hips, right? So in order for me to keep those two positions, I actually have to have rigidity in the midsection, especially on the front. I hope you can understand that, because if I don't have rigidity on the front, then I'm going to fall to the ground. So when you do some aerobic activity and I combine it with that, I now have to breathe through that tension. So just the example again, I was on the floor at rest and I could hold that quite well. But if you could probably think about it, my breath rate wasn't that high. So if I wanted to create a challenge to it, I'll do a flywheel bike, come off and do an FLR so that it's challenging as well, up to the point where I'm starting to lose those two pieces, you know, shoulder balance or my core position. And then I come back on the bike, I provide another stimulus of aerobic work, and I go back to the floor. Based upon our progression of skills, if you see the FLR as an anterior core stabilizing activity, and people are moving beyond that now where they can hold it in a really stable position, I would suggest that this could be a new progression up from that. And the key thing you're going to have to give people cues for is to be able to have an okay control around breathing and having tension at the same time. Now, it may seem like we're just fast tracking like good control in a low breath situation to more aerobic work and lack of control. It's not necessarily the case. It is actually a very safe, fantastic way to get people to start practicing having tension, but being able to breathe through that tension. Because if you can imagine, to my example of Johnny, who's the athlete, versus Billy, who just wants to live long and prosper, Billy, who wants to live long and prosper, most of his functional tasks will not require massive amounts of high rates of breathing and tension. But he does need to be able to keep tension and to perform day-to-day activities with tension to prevent back pain, to functionally do what he needs to do, right? For the performer over there, it may look like, flywheel bike with an FLR and a weight on their back, because they need to challenge what their buffer zone is of capabilities with breath control and tension. So I hope that makes sense, that if you're progressing people and let's say it's brand new to them where they're great at the FLR, they have great spinal stability during that movement, and now you give them breathing and they get here and it's a big challenge, that's okay, because that's their next stage of development, is learning how to breathe as they manage that. So in prescription, don't forget, and it's as if I did 30 to 40 seconds again. The reason why I say 30 to 40 seconds is because you want people working at a rate in which they're going to last for minutes and minutes of that effort. But the reason why you want to do 30 to 40 seconds is that if you only did 10, you're just releasing stored energy here, and I'll have enough saved up in order to do this. When I get to 30 to 40 seconds or more, if I'm going to be doing this in intervals, it makes me have to breathe a little bit more, because my body is going through this state of affairs where it's like, well, he's going to do this for another couple of minutes, I think. And so it basically just downstream says that you're going to have to breathe more so in order to do the activity. So if I get off there, just pretend I got off it after 40 seconds, and then I do the hold, and I'm trying to, and you can't see it, but I'm trying to breathe while I maintain stability from right to left shoulder, while I have that pressure through the floor protracted, while I have a neutral neck, quads and butt and midsection engaged, and I'm doing that hold. The whole time I'm doing that, my brain is now learning, oh, interesting, he's capable of breathing as he keeps that tension, right? What failure points would be on that? It's really individually prescribed, but I would go back and look and see how long someone can hold an FLR in general. If you know they're really legit at it, then you don't need to make them stay there for 10 minutes for an FLR. You could probably give really extended sets of 30, 60, even 90 seconds in between the flywheel bike. If people are brand new to the FLR, you think they wouldn't get past a minute, I would do 15 to 20 second holds here with 30 to 40 seconds on the flywheel bike back and forth. And that would be a fantastic upgrade for you to get them to move beyond just the FLR in the front leaning rest position, which is an anterior core exercise. You're now going to do an anterior core exercise, plus you're going to challenge them with some breathing. So use that in exercise prescription. If you have any questions on it or other methods that we could use, some other things you may have questions on, which I'd welcome, would be rowing with FLR, double unders with it, ski erg, etc., because those are great questions to ask, because each of them have a different dose response for that anterior core exercise. If you got any questions, hit me up in the bottom here, or just have a conversation on how you can implement it for some strategies. As well, if you got any questions more so on technique that we just briefly discussed this time around.